I never imagined my own son would look at me with such contempt. Standing in the living room I'd called home for 37 years, I watched Douglas rifle through his mother's will like he was counting lottery tickets. His face twisted into something I barely recognized when he reached the part about the properties. A beach cabin. His voice cracked with disbelief. Dad gets some rotting shack on the coast, and I get the villa in Tuscany. He let out a harsh laugh that made my chest tighten. Well, that's just perfect. Even in death, Mom knew who deserved what. I kept my mouth shut. What was the point of arguing? Jennifer had made her choices, and apparently I wasn't worth much in her final accounting. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat awkwardly from behind his mahogany desk. He'd known our family for 15 years, watched Douglas grow from a spoiled teenager into a spoiled adult. But he stayed professional. Your mother left very specific instructions, Patterson said carefully. The cabin property is fully paid off, Robert. No mortgages, no liens. Douglas snorted. Great. Dad can live with the rats and seagulls. He turned to me and I saw something cold flicker in his eyes. Something I'd been seeing more often since Jennifer got sick. Hope you like the smell of low tide. My hands clenched involuntarily. This wasn't grief talking. This was Douglas being Douglas, the same kid who used to break my tools and blame the neighbor's children. Jennifer had always defended him, always found excuses. He's just expressing himself, she'd say. Boys need to find their own way. Well, he'd found his way. All right. Straight to cruelty. Patterson slid a set of keys across the desk. The cabin is located at 127 Driftwood Lane in Clearwater Beach. It's been unoccupied for some time. Unoccupied. Douglas laughed again. That's a nice way of saying abandoned. I pocketed the keys without looking at them. The metal felt cold against my fingers. How long has it been empty? Patterson hesitated. I'm not entirely sure. Mrs. Holloway was very private about that property. Douglas was already gathering his paperwork, shoving it into his leather briefcase. Well, this has been fun, but I have a flight to catch. The villa needs to be appraised, and I want to see what I'm working with. He paused at the door, looking back at me with that same expression he'd worn when he was 12, and I'd caught him stealing from my wallet. You should probably pack your things, Dad. I'm putting the house on the market next week. The words hit me like a physical blow. This is my house, too, Douglas. Not anymore. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Mom left it to me along with everything else that matters. You've got 48 hours. The door slammed behind him, and suddenly the house felt enormous and empty. Patterson was packing his briefcase, avoiding my eyes. I couldn't blame him. Watching a family tear itself apart probably wasn't in his job description. Mr. Holloway, he said quietly, if you need any help understanding the legal aspects. I shook my head. I understood perfectly. My wife of 35 years had died 6 months ago, and my son was throwing me out like yesterday's garbage. The house where I'd raised him, where I'd painted every room and fixed every broken faucet, where I'd held Jennifer through her final illness, wasn't mine anymore. That night I sat in my empty living room, surrounded by boxes. Douglas hadn't wasted any time. He'd hired movers to come the next morning, and they'd take everything that belonged to him, which apparently was everything Jennifer had cared about. The good china, the antique furniture her mother had left her, even the family photos. I picked up one picture that had fallen from a box. It was from our wedding day. Jennifer in her white dress, me in my rented tuxedo, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. She looked so young, so happy. When had that changed? When had I become someone she could discard so easily? My phone buzzed. A text from Douglas. Movers come at 8 a.m. Don't get in their way. I turned off the phone and went to bed in my own house for the last time. The next morning, I loaded my pickup truck with everything that was truly mine. It wasn't much. My clothes, some tools, a few books Jennifer had never cared about. The movers barely acknowledged me as they carried out 37 years of my life. One of them almost took my toolbox until I explained it wasn't on their list. By noon, the house was empty of everything except me and my truck keys. I sat in the driveway for a long time, engine running, looking at the house where I'd expected to grow old. The roses Jennifer had planted were starting to bloom. I'd fertilized them just last week, the same way I had every spring for 15 years. Someone else would enjoy them now. The drive to Clearwater Beach took 2 hours. I'd never been to this part of the coast, never even known Jennifer owned property here. How long had she kept this secret? And why give it to me if it was as worthless as Douglas seemed to think? Driftwood Lane turned out to be a narrow, sandy road that dead-ended at the beach. The houses were a mix of old beach cottages and newer construction. Some looked like million-dollar getaways, others like they'd been abandoned for years. Number 127 was definitely in the second category. I parked in front of what might have been a driveway once upon a time. Now it was just sand and weeds. The cabin itself looked like it had been fighting a losing battle against the salt air for decades. The blue paint was faded and peeling. The front porch sagged dangerously, and several windows were boarded up. This was what Jennifer had left me. This was her final message. But as I sat there in my truck, something nagged at me. Jennifer had been many things: cold, distant, sometimes cruel in her quiet way. But she wasn't stupid. She'd managed our finances carefully, never made a decision without considering all the angles. Why would she hold on to a worthless property for years? I grabbed my toolbox from the truck bed and walked up to the front door. The key Patterson had given me was old and tarnished, but it turned smoothly in the lock. Too smoothly for a door that hadn't been opened in years. The door swung open with barely a creak. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be what I'd expected at all. The first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of decay I'd expected. It was lavender, faint, but definitely there, like someone had been burning scented candles recently. I stood in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The inside of the cabin was nothing like the outside suggested. Yes, the furniture was old, but it was clean, dust-free. A soft blue throw blanket was draped over a faded floral couch, and there were fresh flowers, wilted but not dead, in a mason jar on the coffee table. Someone had been living here. I set my toolbox down carefully, afraid to disturb anything. The hardwood floors creaked under my weight, but they were swept clean. Through the small kitchen, I could see dishes in the drying rack by the sink. 2 plates, 2 cups, silverware arranged neatly. This wasn't an abandoned cabin, this was a home, and it had been recently occupied. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Who had been here? And why? I walked through the small living room into the kitchen, and then to the single bedroom. The bed was made, a patchwork quilt spread neatly over it. On the nightstand, there was a stack of books, a half-empty glass of water, and a small framed photograph. I picked up the photo. It was Jennifer, but not the Jennifer I knew. This Jennifer was smiling, truly smiling, a warmth in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. And next to her, a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with the same bright eyes and a cascade of auburn hair. They were sitting on this very porch, laughing. My mind raced. Who was this woman? And why was she here with Jennifer? I looked around the room again, my eyes catching on a small desk tucked into a corner. On it, a laptop, a stack of papers, and a neatly organized box of files. I felt a pang of guilt, but my curiosity was overwhelming. I opened the top file. It was a medical record. The name on the file wasn't Jennifer's, it was Sarah Miller. And the diagnosis, advanced pancreatic cancer. My heart sank. This woman, Sarah, was gravely ill. As I dug deeper, the story began to unfold. Sarah Miller was Jennifer's daughter, my daughter, a daughter I never knew existed. The medical records showed she was 28 years old, and the cancer was aggressive. There were also financial documents, bank statements, and legal papers. Jennifer had been secretly supporting Sarah for years, paying for her medical treatments, her living expenses, everything. The villa in Tuscany, the house Douglas had inherited, was meant to fund Sarah's ongoing care. The beach cabin, the rotting shack Douglas had sneered at, was a safe house, a place where Jennifer and Sarah could spend time together, away from our family, away from the life Jennifer had built with me. The files also contained a series of letters, handwritten by Jennifer to Sarah. I picked one up, my hands trembling. "My dearest Sarah," it began, I know I've kept you a secret for too long, but I wanted to protect you. Your father, Robert, is a good man, but he's easily manipulated by Douglas. I couldn't risk Douglas finding out about you, not with his gambling debts and his insatiable greed. Douglas's gambling debts? I reread the line, a cold dread spreading through me. I'd always suspected Douglas had a problem, but he'd always denied it, and Jennifer had always covered for him. This was a new level of betrayal. The letters detailed Jennifer's plan. She had purchased the villa in Tuscany years ago, intending to sell it to create a trust fund for Sarah. But Douglas, ever the schemer, had found out about the villa and, through some manipulation, convinced Jennifer to put it in his name, promising he would manage it responsibly. Jennifer, already weakened by her own illness, had reluctantly agreed, but not without a contingency plan. She had taken out a massive loan against the villa, using Douglas's forged signature, knowing he would never be able to repay it. The money from that loan, she explained in the letters, was already in a separate, anonymous account, designated for Sarah's care. The beach cabin was my inheritance, not because it was worthless, but because it held the key to everything. Jennifer had left me the cabin, knowing I would eventually uncover the truth. She had trusted me to protect Sarah, to ensure her daughter received the care she needed, and to finally expose Douglas for the manipulative, greedy man he was. The cabin wasn't just a shack. It was a carefully constructed puzzle, a final act of love and justice. I spent the next few days in the cabin, poring over Jennifer's meticulous records. Every detail, every transaction, every letter painted a picture of a woman I barely knew. She had been living a double life, a life of quiet sacrifice and fierce protection for the daughter she loved. And she had been planning Douglas's downfall and my salvation for years. One afternoon, as I was reading through a particularly poignant letter from Jennifer to Sarah, I heard a car pull up outside. My heart pounded. Could it be Douglas? I grabbed a heavy wrench from my toolbox, just in case. The front door creaked open, and a young woman stood there, looking pale and frail but with Jennifer's eyes. It was Sarah. "Hello," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Are you Robert?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, and you must be Sarah." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "My mom told me you might be here. She said you'd be the only one who could figure out her puzzle." We talked for hours. Sarah told me about her life, about growing up with a mother who was always there, but always distant, always secretive. She told me about Jennifer's visits to the cabin, their quiet conversations, their shared laughter. She told me about her illness, about the fear and the uncertainty, and about Jennifer's unwavering support. "She loved you, you know," Sarah said, her eyes welling up. "She always talked about you, about how kind you were, how you always tried your best, even when things were hard." I felt a lump in my throat. She had a strange way of showing it sometimes. Sarah nodded. "She said she had to be strong for both of us, that she couldn't let Douglas ruin everything." Just then my phone buzzed. Douglas again. I'd been ignoring his calls, but the frequency was increasing. Jennifer's timeline was proving accurate. "You should probably answer that," Sarah said gently. "Jenny wanted you to hear how desperate he gets." I glanced at the screen. 15 missed calls since yesterday. I swiped to answer. "Dad, where the hell are you?" Douglas's voice was frantic now, all pretense of politeness gone. "I've been calling for days. I've been busy." "Busy, Dad? I'm in serious trouble here. The bank is saying there are problems with the villa loan, and some company called Apex Financial is claiming I owe them money I never borrowed." I met Sarah's eyes. She nodded slightly. "What kind of money?" I asked. $850,000, Dad. They're saying I signed some contract, but I never signed anything. Someone must have forged my signature." The irony wasn't lost on me. Douglas, who'd spent months forging my signature to steal my savings, was now claiming someone had forged his. "That's a lot of money, Douglas. I know that. That's why I need your help. We need to hire a lawyer, fight this thing. They're threatening to take the villa. And without that, you have nothing," I finished. "I understand. Dad, you have to help me. I'm your son." I was quiet for a long moment, watching a pelican dive for fish just offshore. "When you threw me out of my own house, Did you feel like my son then? That was different. I was emotional, dealing with grief. You know I didn't mean it. Actually, I think you meant every word, just like you meant it when you said I didn't deserve anything from your mother's estate. Dad, please. I made mistakes. But this is bigger than hurt feelings. These people, they're not just threatening to take the villa. They're talking about criminal charges if I don't pay. Criminal charges for what? Silence stretched between us. I could practically hear Douglas calculating how much truth to reveal. They're saying I committed fraud when I applied for the loan. But Dad, I swear I never signed those papers. What papers would those be? Some kind of co-signer agreement that says Mom guaranteed the loan. But that's impossible, right? Mom would never have agreed to something like that without telling us. I closed my eyes. Jennifer had been right about everything. Douglas had forged her signature, committed fraud, and now he was trying to lie his way out of it. I don't know, Douglas. Your mother kept a lot of things from me, apparently. What does that mean? Nothing you need to worry about. You've got bigger problems right now. Dad, I need you to come back. We need to go through Mom's papers together. Find proof that this is all a mistake. I'm not coming back. What do you mean you're not coming back? Where are you staying? I looked at Sarah, who was listening to every word with careful attention. I'm staying at the cabin. The cabin? Dad, that place doesn't even have running water. It has running water. It has electricity. It has everything I need. You can't be serious. You're going to live in that dump instead of fighting for what's rightfully ours. What's rightfully mine, Douglas, is what your mother left me. And she left me this cabin. She left you that cabin because she felt sorry for you. The words exploded out of him before he could stop them. She told me so herself. She said you'd never amounted to much, and the cabin was like a consolation prize. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking, but it didn't hurt the way it would have a week ago. Now, I knew the truth about Jennifer's feelings, about why she'd really bought this place and what it meant to her. Is that what she told you? I asked calmly. Yes. She said you were too weak to handle real responsibility, that you'd always been a disappointment to her. Sarah's face had gone pale. She shook her head slightly, her eyes filling with tears. That's interesting, I said, because I've been reading some of your mother's papers here at the cabin, and she had a very different opinion of me and of you. What papers? Oh, just some financial documents, bank statements, medical records, things like that. Medical records? What medical records? I let the silence stretch, watching Sarah dab at her eyes with a tissue. Dad, what medical records? Nothing you need to worry about, Douglas. You've got your own problems to solve. Dad, please, I'm begging you. I need help. These people aren't going to wait much longer. What people? Exactly. Apex Financial. They're not a regular, Dad. They do private lending for people who can't get traditional loans. Loan sharks. Douglas had borrowed nearly $1 million from loan sharks. And now he was panicking because they want their money back. That was probably not a smart financial decision, I said. I know that now, but at the time I thought the villa would be worth enough to cover it. The property values in Tuscany have been going up, and I figured I could flip it quickly. Flip it? You were planning to sell your mother's villa? I needed the money, Dad. I had some gambling debts, and they were getting expensive. Finally, a piece of truth. Douglas had gambling debts on top of everything else. How much do you owe in gambling debts? That's separate from this. How much? Douglas? About $200,000. My grip tightened on the phone. Douglas owed over $1 million to dangerous people, and he was trying to drag me down with him. I can't help you, I said. What do you mean you can't help me? You're my father. I'm your father when you need money. When you're throwing me out of my house, I'm just an old man who never amounted to anything. Dad, I was wrong, okay? I admit it. I'm sorry. I was a jerk, but you can't just abandon me. I'm going to lose everything. You already lost everything, Douglas. You lost your mother's trust, you lost your integrity, and you lost the respect of your family. The villa was just a symbol of all that. What are you talking about? What respect? What trust? The truth, Douglas. Your mother knew about your gambling. She knew about your debts. She knew you'd try to sell the villa, and she knew you'd try to throw me out. She planned for all of it. Silence. Then a choked sound. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother was a lot smarter than you gave her credit for. She protected what was truly important, and she made sure you got exactly what you deserved. This is a trick, isn't it? You're trying to get back at me. No, Douglas. This is justice, and it was your mother's final wish. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. Sarah was looking at me, her eyes wide. He's going to be in a lot of trouble, she said quietly. He already is. But Jennifer left him a way out, if he's willing to take it. I explained to Sarah about the clinic Jennifer had arranged, the one that specialized in addiction recovery and financial counseling. It was a long shot, but it was Douglas's only hope. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I grew closer. We talked about Jennifer, about her secrets, about the complex woman she had been. Sarah started to regain some strength, and we began to explore options for her long-term care. The money Jennifer had secured for her was substantial, enough to provide Sarah with the best medical treatment available. Douglas, meanwhile, had hit rock bottom. Apex Financial had seized the villa, and the authorities were investigating the fraud. He called me again, this time from a payphone, his voice broken and defeated. He'd lost everything. I told him about the clinic, about Jennifer's final provision. He was hesitant, but with nowhere else to turn, he agreed. 3 months later, I was standing in the same spot where I'd first met Sarah, but the cabin looked completely different. The state had purchased the property and given us 60 days to relocate. Saoirse had found a beautiful, accessible home 20 minutes inland, close to her doctors, but far enough from the tourist areas to be affordable. I'd bought a small house just 2 blocks away. The money from the property sale had transformed both our lives. Sarah's trust fund would cover her medical expenses and then some, giving her security she'd never had before. My portion was enough to retire comfortably, and maybe even travel. Something Jennifer and I had always talked about but never done. Douglas had stayed in treatment. I'd gotten weekly reports from his counselors, and the progress was slow but real. He'd completed the first phase of the program and moved into independent living within the facility. For the first time in years, he was holding down a job, even if it was just working in the facility's kitchen. Sarah had started college classes online, working toward a degree in social work. She wanted to help other people navigate the medical and financial systems that had nearly overwhelmed her before Jennifer found her. As for me, I was learning how to be happy again. The weight of Douglas's problems, the burden of Jennifer's secrets, the loneliness of feeling unloved in my own family, all of it had lifted. I had a daughter who genuinely enjoyed my company, a future that belonged to me alone, and the knowledge that Jennifer had loved me enough to orchestrate this entire elaborate plan for my happiness. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was the treatment center. Mr. Holloway, this is Dr. Martinez. I wanted to let you know that Douglas has completed phase 2 of the program. He's been asking about making a phone call to you. How is he doing? Very well, actually. He's been working with our financial counselor to understand the damage his addiction caused, and he's expressed genuine remorse for how he treated you and your family. He'd like to apologize if you're willing to listen. I looked out at the Gulf, thinking about Jennifer and the last gift she'd given our family, the chance to heal. Put him through. When Douglas's voice came on the line, he sounded different, quieter, more thoughtful. Hi, Dad. Hello, son. I wanted to thank you for giving me this chance. I know I didn't deserve it. Your mother deserves the thanks, not me. I know. I think about her every day, about how I wasted the time I could have spent with her and how I hurt her when she was dying. I was quiet, letting him find his words. Dad, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm different now, not just because I'm not gambling, but because I understand what I lost, what I threw away. What did you lose, Douglas? My family, your respect, Mom's trust, the chance to be a real son to you and a real brother to Sarah. Those things can be rebuilt if you're willing to do the work. I am. I want to be the man you and Mom raised me to be before the addiction took over." We talked for 20 more minutes. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt about Douglas in a long time: hope. That evening, Sarah and I had dinner on her new porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She'd made Jennifer's recipe for seafood pasta, working from notes my wife had left in her careful handwriting. "Do you miss her?" Sarah asked as we cleared the dishes. "Every day. But I'm grateful too." "For what?" "For finding out who she really was before it was too late. For understanding that she loved me enough to plan all this. For meeting you." Sarah smiled. And in that moment, she looked so much like Jennifer that my heart ached. "She would have been so proud of how this turned out," she said. I nodded, looking out at the water. Jennifer had orchestrated one final act of love, saving her son's life, protecting her husband's future, and ensuring her daughter's security. She'd taken all the broken pieces of our family and arranged them into something that could heal. It wasn't the family I'd expected to have, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.